Hello and welcome to another video review. This is Half-Life 2 for PC, and it was later ported to Xbox, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and Mac OS. Now I would hope that everybody at least knows what Half-Life 2 is. At least you've heard of it. I would hope that anyway. It's only one of the biggest games ever made. I mean, seriously. But, anyway, the game was released in 2004, but it was actually delayed from its 2003 release date. Because what ended up happening was there was a source code leak, and that was a huge ordeal back in the day. Well, it wasn't that long ago, but it was a huge ordeal back then. And people really got upset with that. They're like, why did you hackers do this? You pushed the release date back, you bastards, and all that stuff. And so that had a lot of problems with it. There was also some controversy on its release because it was basically the first game to use online activation, and that was through Steam. You actually had to have Steam to play the game. Now, granted, you could create your own Steam account right then in the installation, but still, at the time, that was pretty irritating to PC gamers, especially because not only was it tied to a single account, and we could never hand off the CD to somebody, like sell it. No, we can't do that anymore. But not only was that a problem, but Steam itself, in the early days, was really, really crappy. It had all sorts of installation problems, all sorts of activation issues. It ran like crap, and well, that really hasn't changed much. But in the end, it really didn't matter in the long run, because the game got glowing reviews from pretty much everybody. And so there has to be some truth behind that, right? Well, why don't we find out? Now, at the time, Source Engine was pretty much never before heard of. I mean, we'd never really seen anything quite this good-looking before, and quite this capable before either. Now, granted, it did have problems running on really old systems at the time, but once you got to about the year it was released, and about the year later, everything was perfectly capable of handling it. And even now, you can pretty much run any Source Engine game and have absolutely no issues whatsoever. I mean, if you want to turn up the details, you might need a better system, but in general, you don't really need a massively powerful system to max the Source Engine and still have it look amazing. Now, granted, Half-Life 2 was the very first Source Engine game to get released, apart from Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, which does look much worse than Half-Life 2, actually. That was from Troika's problems, but anyway. The textures at the time were extremely high-res, the modeling was phenomenal, and then the facial animations had never really been seen before. You actually got to see emotion on people's faces. You actually got to see how they would react to things, with the shock and the little certain visual cues, like they would wink at you and stuff like that you really hadn't seen before in games. And so, at the time, the technology was absolutely amazing. Has it aged well? Absolutely. Now, granted, the textures aren't as good-looking as they used to be. The animations aren't as good-looking as they used to be. But it still looks great. And there's plenty of mods available to really fix the graphics if you really want those. But it's not really necessary. And they recently updated it to the Orange Box engine, which is the updated version of the Source Engine. And so it looks even better now. Now, granted, they still have the low-res textures, but still, it still looks great. Now, in addition to looking great, it also sounds great now, apart from the music. I'm not a huge fan of that music. Soundtrack by itself is basically a mix of kind of techno-electronica stuff, sort of in the vein of the original Half-Life, but not quite that bombastic, fast-paced kind of stuff. It's more mood music this time around, except occasional firefight music and stuff. They did add a little bit more traditional kinds of music to it, though. And it doesn't sound bad. There's a few good songs here and there. Overall, though, I'm just not really impressed with it. Anyway, what does impress me are the sound effects and the voice acting, even today. Voice acting in this game is phenomenal. Every character really feels like a unique character. They have their own soul in this sort of environment. It's not just from the writing, either. It's from the voice acting. These voices really do help bring the game to life, basically. And it's really interesting to see. You get Barney Calhoun from, Blue Shift, obviously, is back, and he's a pretty major character. And he has that sound of the Barneys. At least that's what we called them back in the day on Half-Life 1. He has that voice, and it works perfectly. Same with Dr. Kleiner. He has the sound of the scientist back then. Works perfectly. The new characters as well sound absolutely phenomenal. They really get into their roles really well and just really help draw you into this world. Then there's the sound effects, which are excellent. Now, I'm not a big fan of certain sound effects. Like the pistol sounds a little bit wimpy to me. I mean, it is wimpy, but it could be a little better. But overall, the sound effects are phenomenal, especially with the distance kind of thing going on. The further things are from you, the less loud they are, and it's really this interesting effect because they echo more and they sound different, and it really does give you this sense of depth to the world, and that's really nice because we really hadn't seen anything like that. I mean, we would hear things, maybe if they were far away, they would sound far away, but they didn't really sound like there was a real amount of depth to the world. They just sound softer, I guess. Or they'd just be a different sound effect altogether. And it would sound the same no matter what. But in this one, it's the same sound effects, they just scale. And it's actually pretty cool. So, that and the environmental sound effects, which are just phenomenal. They really atmospheric stuff. That just really does draw you into this world and really doesn't let you let you go. It's pretty awesome. But ultimately, it's up to the story and the gameplay to really carry this game, because all the presentation in the world couldn't really save it if it was a bad game, right? But what you can expect from the story is typical Valve fare. It leaves you with way more questions than you have answers. You're still sitting there wondering who the hell the G-Man is, what role Gordon has, and all this. I mean, you do kind of get his role, but in general, it's very cryptic. It doesn't really leave you with any answers. The story picks up sort of where Half-Life 1 left off. It actually takes place close to 20 years later, I think. But Gordon's been in stasis that entire time, so he's actually the same age that he was in the original Half-Life. And so a lot of people were, that you actually met at Black Mesa, like Dr. Kleiner and Barney Calhoun, who was the star of Blue Shift. You'll run into those people, and also Dr. Vance, Eli, and they'll all be like, Gordon, you haven't aged a bit, and stuff like that. And your new sidekick kind of character is Alex Vance, who is Eli's daughter. And so each of these characters is much more developed than they were in Half-Life 1, obviously. I mean, Barney Calhoun was just kind of your standard guard character that just ran through the facility himself. And but there is no word on Adrian Shepard, so they said they might include him in a later game, but not Half-Life 2. Anyway, basically the Alien Combine have overthrown all of the world's governments in basically 7 hours. I believe what the thing was. I think it was the 7-hour war, where they completely wiped out all of the governments of the world. And they have basically just taken over, enslaved the populace, kind of 1984-ish. Not quite to that human level. I mean, it's definitely alien invasion kind of thing. And so it's definitely a fascist kind of state going on. So you get thrown into all this by the G-Man. You still have no idea who he is, by the way. And it just kind of picks up from there, and you go and do all sorts of different things. But apart from being the typical Valve storytelling, to be honest with you, the story really didn't impress me. And the simple reason for that is it just seems really disjointed. And it's not that they're going for that style that they did in the original game where you had no clue what was going on. It was just chaos all around you. It was hell breaking loose. I mean, that wasn't gone for in this game. I mean, the story should be cohesive. It's basically you meet up with the resistance and they basically start the rebellion right then and there. And yet it still feels like that's not really the main focus of the game. It just goes all over the place. And that kind of bothered me, to be honest with you. I mean, it wasn't like it was a terribly written story. It just seemed really disjointed and kind of all over the place. Again, it's not bad, but it's just not my kind of liking thing going on. Anyway, what it really came down to for me was the gameplay. Now, this game is pretty short, to be honest with you. I mean, it's maybe 8 hours, maybe 10 if you're going really, really slowly. And they more recently added in achievements and updated the engine, of course, to Orange Box. But so that does increase the replay value a little bit. But in general, Half-Life 2 is it's really short, and you're kind of left with like this feeling of, well, really, was that it? I mean, it just seems like that was it seems like it was cut short for some reason. And they just kind of said, okay, we're going to trail this off into the episodic content just so we can make more money. And it's kind of weird that way. But that short gameplay time is pretty good, actually. It's got the standard Valve formula of going in different chapters, and you progress through the game by blasting your way through hordes and hordes of enemies. This time the Combine, not the military forces. And of course head crabs, the familiar zombies, that kind of thing. And you also use physics to your advantage with a lot of the puzzles. Now, the problem with the puzzles in this game, in the original Half-Life, some of the puzzles were fairly clever, but most of them involved jumping. Guess what? Most of the puzzles in Half-Life 2 are physics-based, and they're basically, you wait one end of something, and then you jump. And there's a lot of jumping puzzles. So a lot of people seem to think, oh, you have to really think to play this game. No, you don't. Not really. It becomes reflex pretty quick. I mean, it just comes down to positioning things where they need to be. I mean, it's painfully obvious in a lot of cases that you really need to put this there. And in other cases, it's completely nonsensical. I mean, you go through it and you're like, okay, now what? And you look around for a while and you start fiddling with things, and eventually you find the solution. But it seems like some of the puzzles were designed to be just quick and easy. Just say, hey, look at our pretty physics. And some of them were actually designed to be challenging. And I much prefer the ones that were designed to be challenging, because they actually made me think a little bit. But even then, the game is actually pretty easy. I mean, a lot of people seem to think this game is really difficult, but it's not. It's very easy if you know what you're doing. And I breezed through this thing on hard. I shouldn't be able to do that with Half-Life. I mean, I barely completed the original on normal difficulty. So why am I able to breeze through this one on hard? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, yes, the weapons in general are more powerful. You have fewer weapons than you did in the original Half-Life. And you do get the nice new gravity gun. And that's one of the major problems with it. It actually unbalances the game, because you can pick up heavy objects with that gravity gun and launch them at enemies and have infinite ammo. And so that becomes pretty problematic, because why use your weapons with their ammo and when you can use the much more effective gravity gun and just basically cheap your way through the game? I mean, it really just kind of unbalances it. And the game comes with Half-Life 2 Deathmatch, which is literally just Deathmatch, only in the Half-Life 2 engine and just the weapons and such. And to be honest with you, I don't like it. It doesn't really seem all that balanced to me, because if you get the wrong maps, there's a lot of maps that, well, pretty much all the maps in the original game are made to actually really assist the gravity gun thing going on. And that becomes pretty problematic because, again, it's overpowered in Half-Life 2. So, what you see a lot with the community is that they'll make maps that really don't have a lot of movable objects in them where you can just pick them up and launch them at people. And so, I kind of got into it more when I played it like that. But still, it's not that fun. At least the deathmatch, I mean. The single player itself is fun. But I wouldn't play through it multiple times, to be honest with you. I mean, I might do it again for a Let's Play sometime, but I don't think I'm ever going to play through it again. I played through it once, and that was really enough for me. I mean, it didn't really... There wasn't a whole lot that was memorable. I mean, yes, We Don't Go to Ravenholm was a very memorable level, because it was extremely atmospheric, and I wish they had more levels like that in this game, but they didn't. So... It's really kind of... Most of the game is pretty forgettable, but there's a few moments here and there that are really well done. And while it is a fun game, It's not the amazing be-all, end-all first-person shooter that everybody seems to make it out to be. It's still great. Don't get me wrong. It is a very well-made game. It runs great on pretty much any system you can throw it at. It plays really well. Feels really well designed. The presentation is phenomenal. But it's just not the most amazing game ever made. I mean, PC Gamer actually said, best game ever. Far from it. But it's still good. I give it a 4 out of 5, and thanks for watching.